Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fredlund, and we are on episode 150. So kind of a big landmark reach for us. And tonight we were planning on interviewing Ryan LaPlante, a fantastic player who is a World Series of Poker bracelet winner, a coach. And we actually had to defer that. Ryan was running deep in a big tournament, and so he has rescheduled. And we're looking at finalizing that date. It'll probably be sometime in November. So a bummer, but tonight we are actually going to talk about some hands from the recent Fall Poker Classic, which happened at a casino that is other than our sponsor, and so we won't name them, but if you're in the Minnesota area, you know what I'm talking about. But we are excited to talk about that, some hands, especially from Chris Jones and some others who have been playing some tournaments there. So some real live rec player hands that we're going to dissect and dig into, and it should be a good time. I do want to thank our official sponsor, who is Running Aces Racetrack and Casino. They've been with us from the beginning, so 150 episodes with them as our sponsor, and really big shout out to them. Thank you guys for continuing to support us in that way. And as part of their sponsorship, we share with you the players of the week. The top 4 players who earn points throughout the week earn some bonus tournament lammers. So Brian Morey led the field with 34 points, followed by Greg Hill, Tony Wilson, and Bernie Conkey. So congratulations to those guys. Some real high-level announcements. We have our Discord site, which is basically a group chat site that's open to the public. Anybody can be part of that thing. So if you like to talk poker and encourage each other, rail each other, and celebrate victories, go jump onto that. It's free of charge. It's a fantastic community that's building there. If you want to have access to all of our content, we're producing multiple videos every week. This sort of discussion stuff that we do on the podcast, we do even in more depth with experts, with specific hand breakdowns. We break down MSPT final tables, all kinds of stuff. You can go to rec.poker, find out about membership out there, and then you can try it. 30 days for free. After that, it's $10 a month. So pretty good deal. And by being a member, you also have access to be part of these interviews or any of these podcast recordings that we do, any of our panel discussions. You can be part of those and co-create the content with us. So it's a very unique sort of opportunity for a membership site to be part of co-creating content and building community that way. So please check that out. Quick update on our NFL Survivor pool, which I busted out of a couple of weeks ago. We're down to 15 people. We lost another 8 people this weekend, so down to 15 people left in the NFL Survivor pool. And a few things coming up quick. This Wednesday, October 9th, we have 2 opportunities for you, for those who are members of the Rec Poker community, even if you're just on a trial basis. From 4 o'clock until 5:30 p.m. Central Time, we're just going to have some open hours for beginning players. So if you are more of a beginning player or less experienced player, and if you're available starting at 4 o'clock on Wednesday, we've got a link in the membership site. You go to the events and click on the link, and you can join. And we're just going to have an open discussion, whatever you want to talk about, whether that's basic strategy, how to play in a casino, special rules you should consider, poker math, whatever that is, you can jump in there. Also that evening at 6:30 p.m., again, this is Wednesday, October 9th, we have our 3rd session of our book study. We are going through the Andrew Brokus book, Playing Optimal Poker, led by Cheyenne Bhattacharya. So jump in there as well if you would like. October 10th, this is Thursday night from 8:30 to 10 p.m. We're just going to have kind of a community meet and greet online. Just an introduction to myself, some of the people who are part of the regular panels, and just kind of hanging out and getting to know each other, hear each other's stories, celebrate successes. 8:30 to 10 p.m., jump in whenever it works for you. And the link for that is also on the membership site. October 12th is a Saturday, 8 a.m. in the morning, Central Standard Time. We're going to be interviewing Alec Torelli. Normally we do our podcast interviews on Monday nights. Alec is over in Italy, and this is what worked for his schedule. So 8 a.m. Saturday morning, join if you can. If you're a member, you can get the link on the membership site. And then next Wednesday, October 16th, we're going to be doing a MSPT final table breakdown. We go through the whole final table and do commentary, kind of nerding it up, digging into all the hands. Members are welcome to join that, and the link is in the membership site. So check that stuff out. If you're not on the email newsletter, once a week I send out an email newsletter with everything going on. Get on that. You can just go to rec.poker. At the bottom of any of the pages, you can sign up to be on the newsletter that way. So with that, today we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned, some of the hands from the Fall Poker Classic, specifically hands that Chris Jones has brought up. And we might have some others that are bringing up hands as well. And so with that, I'll end the announcements here, and we will join that interview that we recorded.
Great.
All right, guys. So now we are here with the panel. We got Chris Jones and John Somsky here. Both participated in the Fall Poker Classic. So, Chris, I'll just turn it over to you, man. First of all, great run, dude. Tell us a little bit about kind of where you finished, the size of the field, and all those things.
Thanks. We had 386 runners, and I finished seventh. I got to the final table with a little better than average stack. A couple of things went wrong at the final table for me, but it was a good run, and it was really fun. So.
And it's part of what I love about the Discord channel that we have and kind of this rec poker community. I don't know. I mean, hopefully you weren't feeling any pressure to give updates, but I know there's a bunch of us just like waiting. Hey, has anybody heard from Chris? Has anybody heard from Chris? And I know Taylor had stopped by there to play a tournament, so he was railing you a little bit there. And I just love that sense of community. Hopefully you felt good about that. And didn't
it was great. It was great. I even saw some action shots of me and one of the hands that I brought for us to talk about is there's actually a photo. I think that it was either from somebody, the Twitter, or from Taylor's photo of a very big decision I had. So
that was a Twitter shot because we were like trying to figure out. Okay, it looks like Chris raised and she shoved, and looks like he has a big decision. And then we were watching the Bravo app too. And shortly after that picture came out, it dropped from 9 to 8 people. And we're like, oh, God, I hope it's not Chris.
Yeah. Well, I ultimately, I won't tell you what I ultimately did.
Okay,
you could see if I did right or not.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, go ahead and share with us the hands that you want to talk about.
Okay. Well, the first hand, maybe I'll talk about that big hand, and then we can talk, because I know John wanted to talk some ICM stuff, and that's sort of the other hand that I brought. But so there was this big spot for me, and I think actually one of the reasons I'm bringing it here is I think I made a pretty big mistake in this hand, but I'll be curious what others think. And it's a spot that I find myself in a lot. Our member site, we were asking them about topics they want to talk about, and the biggest thing people have responded so far is defending the big blind, and this is a defending the big blind hand. So basically, we're down to 12. We're at the 15K, 30K level, and I've got 1.8 million in chips. So I've got a really big stack, and I'm in the big blind. The small blind, however, is the table chip leader. She has about 3 million in chips. So we're both very deep, but she's really deep. And it folds to her in the small blind. And she opens for 75K. In the big blind, I decide to complete with King of Spades, 9 of Diamonds. I might consider some raises here. I have a personal, real big affliction to King 9 as a specific hand, because I feel like even when you hit gin with this hand, you're so often in a really bad spot, or a spot where you're really that Queen Jack 10 sort of Broadway flop is even though it's awesome, it's a dangerous spot with King 9.
Right.
So it's a hand I actually really hate. It's one of my least favorite hands, but I feel it's too strong to fold here, so I elect to call.
So a question before we continue: how long had you been playing with the small blind at this point?
I had been moved to this table when we got down to 18, so when there were 2 tables left. So, but it took us very little time to get down to 12. It took us a lot of time to get to the final table. So once we got to 12, we were stuck for quite a long time, a couple of levels actually. I am trying to remember at what point this was in that process. I think it's very early. So I think I've only been playing probably for maybe 20 or 30 minutes with this player. She's a player I don't recognize, but other people did. So I took her as somewhat of a reg. and she actually won this event last year. I got that from the table conversation. So I took her as a reg, somebody who's definitely competent, but I don't know much about her playing style.
So what type of hands do you think she was raising from the small blind with?
I think that she's gonna have opening up her range here a bit. I'm putting her. I think in a lot of cases I can have the better hand here. I think I'm putting her on a number of all the big hands, small, all the pairs, all the broadways. But I'm also putting her on suited connectors down to probably 5-6, maybe 6-7. Some of the one gappers. It's a pretty wide range at this point for me. I would expect her to open, probably in that 50. I didn't also have a sense of whether she's somebody who likes to limp the small blind or just raise her small blind when it folds to her. More and more I'm seeing the strategy of limping or completing your small blind. But I hadn't seen this happen with her before, so I didn't know whether to interpret this as just what she does with her entire, stronger opening range, or whether she might have puts her in the sort of more polarized set of her range.
Because it was folded around to the small blind, correct?
Yes, so folded. Yep.
Okay.
So do you think she's opening like any ace, like ace 3 offsuit, even?
I would
stuff like that?
I would assume so. Yes. The only reason that where I'm unsure, and I like to sort of see, is like those might be hands that somebody might limp. But I at this point when I'm ranging somebody and I don't know much about them, I'm including all the aces.
And with
I know if I were in that position with that stack size, I'd be raising. I'd probably have no limping range.
Yeah.
It'd be 100% fold or raise, and my raising range would be huge.
Right. Yep. I totally agree.
And so just real quick, Rob just joined us. We don't want to go back for all of the broadcasts, but just Rob, really quick, Chris is in a blind versus blind spot. A gal with 100 bigs with 12 people left, opened from the small blind, and Chris has king 9 offsuit in the big blind.
Yep.
With
I've got about
60 bigs.
Yeah, 60 bigs. 50,
yeah.
50, yeah, something like that. So we got 180K in the pot. The flop comes again. I have king of spades, and that king of spades is going to be very important in this hand, and the 9 of diamonds. And the flop comes ace of spades, 9 of hearts, 3 of spades. So it's a nice flop for me. It's not given that we've just said that she probably has all the aces in her range. She probably has all the suited sort of one gappers and connectors in her range. So she's got a lot of spades in her hand. It's a nice flop, but it's not a great flop. And she continues for 125K into that 180K pot, which is a pretty decent size bet. But I, with the pair and the backdoor flush draw, I really think I have no choice here, and I don't think it's probably controversial, but I call. I think that's the only play here, but unless anyone wants to tell me I'm wrong.
The only other thing I could do, but it would be, I think folding is out of the question.
Yeah.
But I could see an argument being made for a raise, but I think you'd have to have a better feel on what the player would do in order to do that.
Yeah. And it's a kind of hand, I mean, I guess you're at that point, if you're raising with the intention of folding to anything other aggression. But
it becomes a semi-bluff at that point.
Right.
You're hoping to take it down right there, just in case she's just doing a blind continuation bet.
Right.
Yeah, if you raise there and she calls, you're probably going to get a lot of free turn cards. You do have some fold equity there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you could hit a lot of good turn cards. I kind of like the flat just because of, stack size, you have enough chips, but boy, do you really want to end up playing for a 60 big blind stack with 12 people left with middle pair,
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were going to raise it, almost just be a click back, a min bet to maybe 250, 275, something like that.
I think you're sitting there with a condensed range, so don't you just want to check that or call it? I mean,
yeah, that was my impression, and the other reason I didn't want to raise here is I feel like a lot of the time I have the best hand here, and I'm not sure that I want to get into a raising war with the chip leader with a hand that quite often is the best hand. I mean, I'm still nervous about the ace. She definitely has spade draws, so that maybe the raise is getting her off some of that equity. But she's not folding spades to a raise here anyway. So
right.
I'm not sure what I'm trying to get her off of that is beating me.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can get her off of those queen jack, jack 10 sort of hands, but why do you don't really want that to happen?
Right.
I think you talked me into it. I think raising's probably a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, I make the mistake of the next so we'll see where this goes. So anyway, there's 430K in the pot. So far, it's pretty uncontroversial. I have 1.4 million behind. The turn is the 6 of spades. Mm-hmm. So which is a real nice card for me, I think. So I now have second pair still with the nut flush draw. She bets into me 175K into that 430K pot. And this is the spot before I tell you what I did where I think I made a mistake. But I have a curious what's your play here?
I think I'm still just calling here. I think I'm still underrepresenting my 9 a little bit. I think I'm trying to realize that equity with the king of spades. I mean, you can make an argument for making a big aggressive play here. I just don't know if I love it, because if she goes 175, I mean, I guess John likes more of a click back, but if you go to 400 or 500K, which is sort of probably where I would end up, probably if I re-raise, I'd probably go to like 450 or something like that, or 425, then, that's a third to 40% of my stack. Can I fold then? And if I'm not going to fold to her re-raise, do I just jam here? So, and which I don't love either. Like if she has spades or she has an ace or a set or something, I don't love it. But I think for me, it's just a call, and let's just see if I can hit the magic on the river, or hopefully not have too difficult of a decision on the river.
Yeah, based upon her betting so far, a river bet's probably going to be in the 250, 300K range. Mm-hmm. And I think you can still comfortably call that.
Yep.
And I still think even if she makes that river bet, a non-trivial portion of the time, you're going to be ahead, because she might be doing this with 9-10 with like the 10 of spades, or she may already have 2 spades too, in which case you definitely don't want to be bloating the pot at this point in time. So I think I'm with Steve. I like the call.
Do you read anything into her bet sizing there? I mean, obviously she's a good player. She won it last year. She went 2/3 pot on flop, and then she ratchets it down to 40% on turn. I mean, do we read that as she's just not trying to semi bluff but doesn't want to risk many chips, or do we read that as like a value heavy sort of bet, or how did you reconcile that?
Well, based on what I did, I read it as weak, but okay. I'd be curious what you think. I mean, I really felt, okay, if she's has basically raised or opened and then bet the turn and now bet the flop and then bet the turn, but she's down bet on this turn, I'm trying to think about, I guess if I have just hit, knowing that I have the king of spades, I mean, if she's got queen jack of spades, queen 10 of spades, something like that, I'm thinking she's sizing that up a bit more, but maybe not. Maybe
because
not.
Because if she has a made hand that's not a flush, I mean, you think there she would size up, right? Don't you think if she has like ace-6 or ace-9 or ace-3 or pocket threes?
See, I
would
think that bet
up.
is really polarizing to me. It reads either she's got a flush and one that she's not too worried about. So something like Queen Jack, Jack 10, or she's got, maybe a naked ace, and just wants to.
It's a blocker bet almost.
Right. I mean, so or she could have 9-10 with the 10 of spades too.
Right.
So you might still be winning, but.
And here's where my thinking went, and based on the conversation and as I've thought about this hand in retrospect, I think what you just said is all right. But what I was thinking during this hand is there are so few spade combinations that she has that can do this, and there are so many aces in her range still, and I think I can get her off of an ace. So that's where my thinking led when I did raise to 500K, and then she snap shoved.
Yes.
So, and we can talk about that spot in a second. But where my thinking was on this was I can get her off of an ace with a raise here. But I'm thinking now that I don't know. I have so much both showdown and potential sort of nut flush equity that this is pretty much a clear call. If I had king 8 of king spades, 8 of diamonds, or king 10 or something like that, without that pair, I like this play a lot better. But I in this spot, I don't think it's the right play.
Let me ask you a question because I missed the beginning. Was this a raised pre-flop?
She was small blind and raised we're at 15K, 30K blind. She raised to 75K and I called.
Okay. I mean, she's got the goods in her hand. She's got pocket aces in her range very much of the time here.
Right. Absolutely.
It's too aggressive. I mean, she's very aggressive on both streets. If she had something like ace king, ace queen, something that, she hit top pair, but then the board flushed out, I don't think she'd be as aggressive, especially going all in. You've got the nut flush draw, so that takes that bluff out of her range. So, yeah,
One thing to keep in mind too, Rob, that might color it a little bit is she has about 3 million in chips right now compared to Chris's 1.8 million. So they're both very deep stacked.
Exactly.
Which I think widens her raising range pre-flop a little bit. Particularly since she has Chris outstacked. Because Chris is a big stack and he's big enough that he doesn't need to tangle with her, that she might think she can get away with a little more.
I don't like that logic. I think if you got a big stack, you don't want to tangle with another big stack. You don't want to risk that. I mean, again, we talk about ICM and that sort of thing. The chips that you lose are much more valuable than the chips that you from an ICM standpoint, right? I mean, for her to go from 3 million to 4 million, if she got 1 million of Chris's chips, is not significant. Those million chips are not worth her risking 1.8 million of her chips to get Chris's chips. So I just think she's really strong. I don't like this spot at all. I'm throwing up in my mouth. I don't know what to do. I'm probably folding right now, reserving what I've got left to look for a better spot.
Yeah, so basically the situation now is that I have to, if I've got one card to come, at this point, I'm doing the math in my head. I'm pretty much thinking I'm down to 9 and maybe 7 outs if she's already got a flush. And I need 25% equity to call. So I really can't call unless I can put her on some more bluffs or, if there's some possible hands where if a king or a 9 comes and can make me a winner, which I can't find many ways that it can, that's the only way I think I can call this. So I ended up, after a very long tank and very much wanting to call and wanting to chase, I ended up folding. Kind of frustrated myself that I've just kind of blown up, half of my stack pretty much on this hand, where I think I really made a mistake on that turn.
Well, you still have like 1.2 million left, right? So it's still 40 bigs. I mean, it's a 30-year stack. The one thing that's interesting, and I wouldn't have thought of this if I was playing it live, but now that I'm thinking about it, when she bets the flop that has an ace 9 3 2 spades in it, and then you call, I mean, her radar should be up like, okay, what does this guy have? Mm-hmm. He has an ace, he has a 9, he has spades. He could have a set. I mean, there's only so many things that you're going to have where you call pre and then you call on the flop. And then a spade comes, which if she's worried about you having spades, should slow her down a little bit, you'd think. But she continues, and so does that, I'm asking that as a question. Maybe she wants to just kind of see where you're at, see if that'll scare you away if you have an ace or a 9. But, she continues when one of the worst cards off the deck rolls off if she thinks you're on a spade draw.
Right.
She continues and she downsizes. That is sort of a signal of strength, I suppose. Like she, you know what I mean? Like she's not really slowing down when one of your draw cards gets there.
Well, we know for sure she's doing it with less than the nuts.
Right.
Because
correct.
Chris holds the king of spades. But I would be, you put in your email, you put a few hands she had. I don't think she would even do this with a hand as weak as the queen of spades and an offsuit 9.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's either got the flush already, or I really like an ace queen, ace jack with the lower card being the spade.
Right.
I think is really likely as well.
Right, and those are actually, I mean, she's bluffing at that point, but I'm still losing to her bluff. So, I feel like there's no choice here but to really fold. I mean, I can't really. The only thing, like, if she's possibly doing this with, still a strong ace that doesn't have a spade, then, but I don't think she's doing it.
Right.
I don't think. I can't. I mean, she can't call. She can't call with, like, if she's got ace king without a spade, she can't really call that bet. But are you going to turn it into? Are you going to jam for that much with that? I can't. I couldn't do it. So
even if that's what she's doing, you still only have like 14 outs.
Right. Right.
Right.
But I think if I have 14 outs, right, I can make this call. Well, I can probably make this call.
From an EV perspective, you can make the call. It's just an ICM perspective is at the right play. Kind of Rob saying, obviously you got the, sort of this utility curve sort of thing of you call off there in that spot. But obviously that's if you know what she has. That's just one part of her range that you've sort of underweighted. I think it's a fold once you've done the 500 and once it gets shipped. I think it's a fold. Yeah, I think your question is really is that re-raise a profitable re-raise?
The other thing I thought on my like as I was driving home from the tournament, because this is not the hand I went out on. I went on and I did fine. And I played for several more hours after this, but it was a hand that stuck with me for a long time. And I feel like if you're gonna do this, and I still think this is not the right play. I think the right play is to call. But if you're gonna do this, I think you need to raise even bigger, probably to a shove, where you take advantage of your king of spades to the maximum capacity, because even if she's got a flush, then she doesn't have the nut flush, and you're putting all the potential pressure on her rather than allowing her to put that back on you. I still think that's not the right play. I still think calling is the right play, but I feel like even in raising, I made the wrong play.
So when you raised, how much money was in the pot at that point?
Let's see. We went 430, so there's 1.4 million.
So her bet went to 1.6, and then you went 500, right?
Yep.
So 1.4 to start the turn.
Yep.
Okay, so 1.6, and you had how much behind at that point?
I had about 900K.
Oh.
And you bet No, that was after or before you'd raised to 500.
After.
Yeah, you had 1.4.
So you had 1.4 before. So it's barely an oversized pot-sized raise.
Right.
So I think you're right. If you are going to raise, particularly with the king of spades there, the move is to shove.
Yep.
Because I think even if she's sitting on, even if she has a made flush at that point, that's a really hard call for her.
Yeah.
She has to call 1.4 million.
If you've got Jack 10 of spades or something there, you're probably doing it, but it's not comfortable.
Right. And a hand like Ace Queen with the Queen of Spades, I think she finds a fold there, even though that hand is a really strong hand and has a lot of equity against a lot of ranges.
Yep.
And so it's either, either the bigger raise or, could you justify a small raise there? 175 to 350 and give yourself an out there. It's one or the other. I think kind of where you left yourself, sort of this tricky spot there. I'm not saying it's the right answer, but that's another option, is to say, well, if I raise here to 350, 375, she shoves. It's an easier getaway. But there's also the potential that if she's doing this with light, or potentially you get just the call there and then check on the river.
Well, the thing I don't like about the clickback raise on that is that what my intention was with this raise was to get her off a non-flush hand, basically an ace. Mm-hmm. So if I think a clickback, if you've got ace king, ace queen, it's a pretty easy call.
Yep.
I think.
Yeah, and that's where I'd be attacking maybe different parts of her range. You're right. I think if you're attacking that part of her range, you probably have to go bigger. If you're attacking some other crappy part of her range that she's screwing around with, the king jack with one spade, or queen jack with one spade, or pocket eights or something like that, depending on the kind of player it is, then you can get away with more of a min click.
Yep.
Yeah, whereas if you just call here, there's a good chance that for the same 500K you put in the pot, you'd be able to see the river.
Yep. Boy, did I want to see that river.
Right. Rabbit hunt.
Yeah.
That's a call all the way. Once you get to that spot, there's nothing you can do there but call. Hope you get lucky on the river.
And the piece I like about it too is, is this idea of underrepresenting your hand. Mm-hmm. If she is screwing around with pocket eights or some red king queen or something like that, you're giving her a little bit of rope. Your 9 might be good there in a lot of times, or she might have queen 9,
right,
or something like that. So you give her a little bit of rope, and potentially you get to see a cheap showdown, and it guarantees you're going to when you just call there, it guarantees you get to see the river.
And I think that's the mistake I made. I focused on what's the top end of her range, not the top end of her range. Besides flushes, what's the top end of her range that is currently beating me that I can try to get her off of, which is what I was trying to do with the raise. But I think I forgot or neglected the part of her range that I'm potentially still beating. And going to that river is so valuable for me. And so it's a clear call, but it's one that I thought was kind of interesting to talk about, and it's a mistake that I'm going to try to be more cognizant of, and not just because I think it's real easy to make, I think the 1 spade on a 3 spade board when you've got the nut spade is such an easy bluff to consider, right? Because it's you either have it or you don't, and it's so powerful to have it. So it's an easy bluff to make, but I think you have to pick your spots better than I did here.
And I think John was very true with the stack depth the way that it was. She's not going away for a small raise like that, because now you're making the pot bigger than what you have left in your stack, and you can no longer threaten her. It's just your fold equity is all in.
Yep.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's the question. Yeah, for me, part of it's fold equity, and I don't disagree with that, Rob, too. I think part of it is it's almost like a river block bet when you re-raise turn small. She goes 175, you go 375. If she ships, you just fold. If she calls, then what is she going to do in the river? What is she going to do there? Once she just called your re-raise on the turn, she's not super strong, probably. She probably doesn't have like a queen high flush. So then you might just get to go check on the river.
Right.
or far cheaper.
Right.
So that's part of that strategy.
And that's that power position too. I think in raising here, I've kind of given up that. And that's another thing that I think was a mistake here. So it was a pretty butchered hand, but I hope we all can learn from it a little.
Yeah, I think it's a call too, but I think it's a good one to assess. And I think, have you been playing where you're trying to look for spots to be more aggressive, or was this just?
I'm particularly trying in I think late in tournaments when it gets to the sort of the final table bubble, the money bubble, those kinds of pressure situations. I was generally somebody who would become much more passive in my play. I try to ladder up. I try to get to that final table. I try to get to the bubble, and I've really been trying to push myself that when you see the Wazwazes of the world or the Matt Alexanders of the world, that's when they make their huge stacks, right? They're not trying to survive into the final table. They're trying to arrive there with a monster stack. And so I think I picked a bad spot here, but I'm trying to push myself to find better spots to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'd say kudos to you at least for, if you're trying to be intentional with that spot. Yeah, maybe it wasn't a good spot, but that's, I think, part of how we learn through this thing is you kind of do some things you're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
I guess if she folded, maybe you would have felt like a hero. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'd still be talking about this hand if she folded.
Right.
But I think it's a really good hand. And I think it's one of those spots where we talk about all the time where it's a lot easier after the fact to sort of assess it. But in the moment, I've been there many times where you just think, man, this would be a good raise spot. This would be, I can get her off of this. I mean, it's hard to kind of back up and separate yourself from the logical side.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so dinosaur mind that I would probably just jam all in right there. If I ever thought I was going to raise, it would just be, okay, I'm just going to jam because no matter what happens, I still have out to the nuts.
Right.
Yeah. Dinosaur mind.
That's the reptile mind, it just, there's no thinking anymore. It's just all, instinct and,
dinosaurs are extinct, Rob, right?
Yeah, I am.
Just checking. Well, did you guys want to do another one? Chris, that's a good one. I appreciate you sharing that, especially when you think you butchered it.
So this one is another one that I'm really interested in terms of final table ICM type play. I think one of the things that I think is more common to focus on are those sort of push shove charts and like when do I shove and how many big blinds do I have and what's my range at that point. But the part that I think gets a little bit more nuanced and dicey is that calling range. Especially when you're on a semi, not great stack. So this is a situation that came up. We're at the final table, down to 8 people. Blinds are 25K, 50K, and 50K. From the hijack shoves his stack for 365K. So a very small stack at this point. And it folds to me in the small blind, and I have 1.6 million. And I have ace of diamonds and 6 of diamonds. And, Taylor Moss contributed a little bit of feedback on this hand, thinking that actually folding is a consideration here. I personally feel like folding is somewhat out of the question, given how light this hijack shove can be. And with a hand like ace of diamonds, 6 of diamonds, I feel like you have enough equity to take a chance, knock out a player, move up a spot, and likely you've got a pretty good hand at this point. But so we can talk about folding. But even if we're not folding, this is a spot where I feel like the ICM kind of thing, this gremlins start talking to me, and whether this is a shove to isolate, and then you're risking that chance that the big blind wakes up with some monster and you go out with the hijack, or is this a call, which it does two things. It invites the big blind to see the flop with you with a really wide range. Oh, by the way, the big blind covers us both. Or
do you know by how much? Like how big their stack was?
He had about I'm trying to remember at this point in the tournament. He had about 2.1 million, I think, at this point.
Okay.
So not like doesn't really cover me, but enough that it would hurt. I mean, if he's got, aces or kings or queens, I think I'm in a lot of trouble there.
Right, but you could really damage him too. But okay,
yeah, for sure. So, and if it's a call, and we're inviting the big blind in with that, are we then for sure? I mean, I think we're automatically folding to a big blind shove. But then, does it mean that if we decide to call this hand, do we also have to call some of our premium hands? Because then otherwise we're completely exploitable to a big blind squeeze. So it's just a spot that I was really. I can tell you what I did, but I'd be curious what you think I should have done before I tell you what I did.
So pay jump wise, just give me a little bit of context.
Let's see. 8th was 2,800. 7th was 3,800, and 6th is 4,800, and then it goes on up.
Yeah. Okay. John, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think I would tend not to try to isolate. I don't think ace 6 of diamonds is quite strong enough.
Mm-hmm.
And the types of hands that are going to call you, I mean, you are blocking them, but they'll often have you dominated.
Mm-hmm.
At best, you're getting called by a hand like pocket 8s, which still has a pair that's over you. Well, you might get called by king queen, which is a hand that would be you'd be ahead of, but you're not going to get called by much that you're beating very much. And I doubt that given that you've already called, without understanding what the big blind tendencies are like, most players aren't going to raise in the big blind there,
mm-hmm.
unless you have knowledge to contradict that.
Right. No, this was a pretty patient, more passive type player. I did not. He would not be raising me light. If he raised me, he's got the goods. So I, in that situation, I think that the calling makes a lot of sense. But, and I suppose that then answers my question. But it does get me thinking about if I'm going to be calling with a6 of diamonds here, do I need to be calling with kings?
Yes.
Yeah. I think actually calling with hands like kings or aces in particular, in this exact situation where one player is all in and you've just got one other player going, is a great play. Because you would like nothing better than for them to shove over the top of you.
Right.
And that gives you great protection. I might even call with hands like queens.
Mm-hmm.
Ace king suited might be a call, or a raise some of the time, a call other portions of the time. So I do think you need to protect your range. You're right. But I think I would have a pretty wide calling range here myself.
So what's the drop off at the point where you're shoving versus calling there? Is it jacks? Is it tens?
I'm probably shoving with jacks and tens, maybe even nines, maybe eights. Probably not though. So I think it's the middle range that I tend to do the middle strong range. I tend to do this shoving with, and then do the calling with the rest of my range.
What about ace queen, ace jack, ace 10? What are you thinking there?
I don't know. In moment, I probably call. I don't know that that's the right play, but that's probably what I do.
You got to call with the plan of what you're going to do if the big blind goes over the top and jams on you. So what are you going to do? If you have ace jack offsuit, you call, lose, raise. You call, lose, all in. What do you do?
I think if I get shoved on myself,
Yeah.
I'm only calling a raise with ace queen or better. So I'm folding ace 10, ace 9, ace 8. I fold this ace 6 suited.
So to that ace jack, ace 10, those type of hands, do they become isolation hands? Or now when Lou goes all in, you go all in the small blind to isolate? Because you still need hands that you're going to do that with. And if you're not going to do it with aces and kings and queens, or ace king suited, what hands? Is it ace queen, ace jack, ace 10 type hands, where you've got the ace Broadway and you're going to give maximum pressure on the big blind?
So in the situation, I'm going to ask, why do you need to have hands that you isolate with?
Well, that is actually one of the things I was actually also thinking about this hand. Do we need a shoving range? Like, is it a mistake? I mean, I think it's often a mistake to let the big blind in, but this is a hand where we might not even mind if the big blind calls and we just check it down and hope to eliminate a player. We're both laddering up at that point. Do we need an isolation range in this spot?
So basically it's the ICM part of it that changes the dynamics there. Because normally earlier in the tournament, you're going to want to isolate.
Yep.
Because you don't want somebody else to catch a flop on you by letting them in cheaply. So you generally isolate with that ace king when somebody goes all in with a short stack. You just say, okay, I'm all in with my ace king to get everybody else to fold.
Yep.
But now with that ICM consideration, you feel if you let him in, now there's two of you against that one hand, and you have twice as good a chance of taking him out. And if this person is as passive as you're talking about, that's probably what would happen. You probably just check it down no matter what hits.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in general, if there's an all-in player and a dry side pot, most players play very straightforward at that point. So You're not going to have any difficulty with your post-flop play.
Yep.
You'll either be ahead or you won't, and you'll know.
I like it. So we just call there.
Okay, that's what I did. So I think I played it right, but I was trying to figure out, as I was thinking about this hand, whether I probably would have made the mistake then of shoving with bigger hands. Maybe not aces. I think with aces I'm calling, but something like, jacks, queens. I'm definitely, my instinct would be, oh God, I got to shove here. And I think with ICM wise, as I've been thinking about this, I think this is just a 100% calling range with my entire range that's going to call.
And I haven't read how this turns out yet, so I feel like I'm behind what happens. I'm probably folding here. This ace-6 of diamonds.
All right, interesting. That's what Taylor was saying too.
Did he say that? I just hate the stack sizes. I hate a 7 big blind shove that I'm calling off 25% of my stack with a bigger stack behind me. I don't love it. I think I'm probably ahead of their shoving range, but
so if you're on the big blind there, so there's no one behind you, is it 100% call?
Then I probably call. I think I really have to look at that player. Is this the kind of player who's going to shove even 7 big blinds with king, queen, queen, jack, jack 10? Or am I drawn to 3 outs here? Either way, either my ace or I'm drawing to my kicker. I
believe it was a pretty aggressive player.
Yeah, it was a very aggressive player.
Okay,
who've been shoving a lot.
Okay, then I call.
Not getting called too.
Big blind I call for sure, but that's another dynamic then too. If I just call out of the small blind and the big blind knows, because this is a very aggressive player, they've been shoving pretty wide, and this guy's just calling behind, am I inviting a squeeze play? Mm-hmm. Which, like you said, if I'm doing it with aces or kings, that's great, but right now I don't have aces or kings. Right. And I get that, maybe it looks strong because I am just calling, but that's another consideration too. I just, it's tough because obviously I play tournaments. You want to chip up. You're looking for those spots to chip up so you can take a run at the top 3. But is this a good investment of a quarter of my stack? I'm not convinced.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if the big blind is not real aggressive, so you're not expecting anything out of line from him. If he does raise you, you can easily fold. You've only invested 7 big blinds.
Yep.
I know,
Yeah,
it's ugly. It's ugly.
But if I'm going to put in a quarter of my stack and then fold to a raise, to me that's pretty gross because there's dead money.
Yep.
You know, if he shows me all in, now I'm getting a pretty big
but
price.
if it's a straightforward player,
no, for sure,
that's going to fold if they don't have anything that's better than you.
Right.
Then you're taking minimal risk to take this player out, and ace-6 is probably ahead of the shover's range.
Yeah.
I think
if he's that straightforward where he's only going to re-raise with top 5 or 10% of hands.
The other thing that's protecting me in that case is the fact this is an all-in, right? I mean, like I think the squeeze play works a lot better when both people can fold.
Right.
Yes,
because he's going to have to show his hand, so he can't just do it with like 6-3 or something, right? So he's got to have something to shove over the top and squeeze me out.
I prefer ace-5 of diamonds than ace-6.
Me too.
One of the ace broadways or the ace-5, ace-4 type hand. Ace-6 is right there in that. Yeah, you can't make it straight with it.
Nope, agreed. Well, so I called. The big blind thought for a very long time and ended up folding. And then when I flipped over my cards, he said, "Oh God!" So he obviously had a better hand than me, but he did end up folding it. And I spiked an ace on the flop, and it got worse from there. So
what do you mean it got worse than there? What did the all-in player have?
Queen 10.
And then you lost?
It was ace jack 4, runner straight.
Okay.
So fun times, right? Yay, poker. But anyway, so it's an interesting ICM spot, and I think it's something where maybe from the small blind this is a fold, but it's something also that you're not in these spots as often as you are when you're talking about bubbles and early mon in tournaments and all kinds of stuff. These final table spots are really trickier, and they're definitely worth sort of considering.
Were there other short stacks as well? So you had like 30 bigs, he had like 7 bigs. Were there others?
There were 2 stacks. Like he was definitely the shorty.
Yeah.
And then there were 2 stacks around my stack depth, and then everyone else had us covered. So this put me it definitely sunk me down, put me sort of second from the bottom in chips, and ultimately led to me sort of going down and down and down. So it may have even been a mistake to call this one, but
if you win that one, obviously you knock a player out, and now you've differentiated yourself from the other player. So it's it's a big ICM spot, win or lose.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. Yep. That is an interesting spot.
John,
go ahead, Chris. Did you have
go ahead. No, I was going to turn it over to John too, because John, you had a question about an ICM spot too that you said was somewhat similar.
Yeah. It's an ICM question. That's what's similar about it, I guess. So I was playing a tournament. We had 200 players, so there's 3 million chips in play. We're down to 11 players left in the tournament, 6 players at our table, I believe, 5 at the other table. I have 210,000. Which is 21 big blinds. The blinds are 5,000, 10,000 with 10,000 big blind ante. And at this point, the ICM value of my stack is $2,826. 11th place at this point pays $700 and some dollars, and 10th place pays the exact same amount, $787 for both 11th and 10th. Then it goes to $952 for 9th, all the way up to just over $10,000 for first. I'm under the gun +1. I have pocket 8s, and I decided to raise. 21 big blinds is a awful stack size to raise with, but it's too big to shove with, I think, with 8s. So I raised to 25,000, 2.5 big blinds. Then I believe the other guy was on the button, and he shoved all in for 195K. So I have him covered by 15K. He had been getting, as the tournament had been going on recently, he had been getting more and more aggressive. To make it worse, earlier in the tournament, when we were at a totally different table, he was like down to 7,000 chips, and I had doubled him up, and then our table broke. So I was the reason he was still in the tournament, because I couldn't finish him off earlier. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So at this point, if I fold, I'm down to 185,000, and my ICM value of my stack is at $2,624. If I call and win, I'm up to 405,000 chips. Actually, that's not including the big blinds and ante, so it's probably closer to 430 or something like that. And that's worth 4,286. And if I call and lose, I'm down to 15,000 in chips and exact starting stack. And that's worth $967, supposedly. So, what do you do here? I ran an Equilab simulation, and I think I've got at least 50% equity in the pot. Even if I put them on a fairly tight range, I have 50% equity. Depending upon the range I choose for him, I can get up to like 60, 65% even. Probably not. 65 is probably too high. 50 is probably a little low. So it's probably somewhere in that range.
So what's the worst hand you think he's doing this with?
Maybe a small suited connector, 8-7. I mean, he had been really ramping up his aggression. Now, not a lot of those hands were shown, so he could have just been getting cards. So 8-7, maybe even a 6-5 suited. I think he's doing it with pocket pairs, definitely down through sixes, maybe lower. All of the big Broadway cards. The one question I have, I don't know if he would do this with aces and kings, or if he would try to milk more value out of them. So I don't know what the right play is here. I think my hand is ahead, but given ICM's considerations and everything, is it worth the call? Or ahead of his range, not necessarily his hand.
All right, let me ask a couple questions. Has the table been really aggressive?
In very fits and spurts.
Okay. Has this guy been? You say he's been very all in happy. Has he been doing it when somebody's opened, or is it always when he's the opener he jams?
I don't know, and I wouldn't necessarily say he's been. Well, no, he has done a lot of all-ins. Okay. Sometimes he was just opening.
Because your range is going to be a little bit different if you're going all in over the top of a previous raise.
He had done a couple of all-in earlier when his stack was shorter. He had done some open all-ins. But I don't think any of his all-ins had been called at this point. I don't think I had actually seen his hands. He had been opened and gotten re-raised and folded a couple of times. we kind of had a dynamic where I could see, it felt like he was trying to pick on me. Like maybe he thought I was the spot. I may have been the spot at that table, actually. But so I don't know, but I don't know if that's real or if that's just me making it up in my head.
Do you think he's positionally aware? Like he would look at you as under the gun one and sort of narrow your range, or is he not? Is he not that type of player? Like he just looks down at his cards and hey, these are good. I'm going to shove, or
it's tough to say because we're also 6-handed at this point.
You're kind of in the hijack also.
Under the gun and +1 is exactly.
Oh right. I forgot that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I had played with him a little bit before, and his play when we were on one of the early tables was substantially different than his play here. So he had definitely switched gears as we approached the final table.
Yeah, I guess my questions would be, do you have a perspective on what their image was of you based on how you've been playing, or if they played with you before, and then what is your perceived skill edge in the tournament or at that table?
At that point in time, it's conceivable that I was the weakest player in the tournament, or at best average. We had Paul Cross sitting on my right. Matt Alexander had busted from our table just a few players earlier, so that made it a little bit weaker. Ty Din was still in it. So there weren't.
So a bunch of cream puffs.
Yeah, exactly. I may have had a skill edge on one or two players left in the field. I don't think I'm like horribly outmatched, but I'm. I don't know.
But just, the reason I ask is, I never expect you to be fully, overmatched in any spot. But, if you felt like you had a significant skill edge over that table, then it might be an easier spot to fold and find a better spot. You gave your ICM, kind of what happens if you call win, call and lose, and all that stuff. And basically, if you're 50% equity, your expected ICM is the same as if you fold. It basically is almost exactly that. And so the question is, do you want to accept or reject variance at this point? Your expected ICM is the same. And so for me, then it kind of comes down to, if it's all really, really, really close, for me, a lot of times it comes down to skill edge. If I feel like, I'm going to need to just take my shot here, I have 50% equity and these players are going to keep putting pressure on me and I'm not comfortable with that, then I maybe am more prone to get it in. If it's more like, either I think I can outplay these guys, or they're just so crazy, I think I can find a better spot to actually get my double up, then I maybe wait.
Yeah, me in a vacuum, I'm calling this, unless the other thing we haven't asked you is, are there any really significant short stacks at either of the tables that you're aware of? Like
I'm not aware. So right now I'm garnishing a sling, which makes me a little slower getting up and down. So I wasn't going over to the other table to figure it out. I don't think anyone was significantly. I think the biggest stack at our table was slightly over 400K, and the smallest stack was maybe like 150, 160. Mm-hmm. So, so it's fairly close there. If I had won this pot, I would have been in the run. I would have at least been second in chips at our table, if not first.
It's close to me. It's to me, it's a really close decision. I probably get it in with eights. It's a pretty good hand.
The other thing I look at, so 12th or 11th place paid $787.
Right.
you go up to 7th place. You don't quite even double up. You get to 1532, right. And first place is 10,000.
And that's why I'm calling.
None of these. I mean, even $10,000 for me is not life-changing money. It is bankroll.
Right.
It's significant.
It helps the ROI.
Bankroll. Oh yeah. But if I don't, in order for me to really feel satisfied, I probably need to finish in the top 3 in this tournament. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit of a disappointment. So that, and I don't know that that's right or wrong. That's just, kind of my attitude. I don't need the money from these poker tournaments, but I would really like the glory.
Yeah, well, I think that's huge. I was just going to say that when I tried to interrupt you, and I apologize for that. But, it comes back to, why do we play this game? And there are people that are saying, man, I just need to score. If I can make, a couple $1,000 here, I can set myself up so I can play more tournaments. It's just really important for me to kind of ladder up. And then there's people that are like, trying to get the ROI, max ROI for their investors. And then there's people like you that are saying, man, of course I want the highest ROI possible, but really it's, I want to, bink a big tournament. And so it does kind of come back to why are you playing this thing and what's your ultimate goal? From a pure ICM perspective, I think, if you're playing 6-handed and it's your final 6 players, I think that's a very different thing than you're playing 6-handed and it's the final 11. Because, like you said, 784, 787, 952. And of course, picking, laddering up 2 or 3 more spots for an extra couple $100 is nice, of course. But when your eye is on that 10 grand or the glory, the trophy, the respect of your peers, that's going to skew it your way. So I think from a pure, ICM EV perspective, it's a neutral play either way. So then it comes down to, what are you ultimately trying to accomplish? And for you, if it's going for the victory, then maybe it's a spot to get it in. Okay, so then I guess the final questions I have, from a chip EV point of view, is everyone in agreement that 8 is ahead of his range? Well, you ran the Equilab. I did run the Equilab, but I'm just wondering if my
based on the way you described him, yes.
I think so. I think, to me, it comes down to, is this guy going to shove with like 5, 6s, and 7s, and he's going to shove with like king, queen stuff? If those are kind of in the range, then I think you're ahead. If it's like, no, this guy's like 9s are better and ace, queen are better, then like, I don't think so. Sorry if I cut you off, Chris.
No, I agree. But based on the description of this player and somebody who has been shoving quite a bit and kind of trying to, really use their chips to sort of get them up, I think we're ahead of this range with 8s.
So I ended up calling, and the reason I'm mulling this over so much is, one of the things I did in this tournament better than I have done in other tournaments recently is practicing patience. No. So, and this was not the patient play. The other gentleman had ace jack offsuit, and spiked the jack, and that was it for that one. Went all in blind under the gun next hand, and he actually, I got called. Of course, I had 1.5 big blinds, shoved blind, didn't even look at my cards, and got called by like 4 different people. Of course, it was the same gentleman who rivered a flush. As it turned out, I would have won had he not rivered the flush, because I had queen 7 and flopped to queen.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was still a fun tournament and a good day.
Yeah, those are interesting spots. Those ICM things are an interesting spot, because it's this tension between, I want to chip up and take a run at the top couple spots, and if I can practice more patience, I can chip up and often find a better, ladder up and often find a better spot. I think that's a interesting dilemma.
And one of the things I keep hearing players talk about at the tables I'm at is that, that the structures of these tournaments, especially at places like Running Aces, are really, they're so top heavy that they really encourage this kind of play, right? I think that if the structures ever changed and it became a little bit more sort of flat between sort of people, because it is surprising, I think, for people who sometimes make their first cash or make an early cash, that you don't even double your money most of the time. And I think that that's often a very surprising thing to a lot of people. And then at the top level, the money is so big compared to that. And I think it just encourages, when all things are equal, it's time to gamble and win a flip, and I think that's sort of how this game plays out in some ways. And I think the structure is what encourages that in terms of like the way I tend to see it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's the part that people don't really understand, that are especially newer to tournament poker. And it's one of the reasons I always tell people, track your stuff, because at least for me as a data nerd, you can get some great insights. Like when I first started playing tournaments, I played quite a bit. I think, typically 10% of the people cash in a tournament at Running Aces. And I was cashing like 26% of the tournaments. I'm like, wow, man, I'm really good. And I had a negative 20% ROI. Like, how can that be? I'm like cashing 2.5 times as much as I'm supposed to cash. Right. And I'm a negative player. It's because when I was cashing, like my average cashing was like 2.5 times my buy-in. That was my like conditional cashing factor, I called it. Like, so when I did cash, my expected payout was 2.5 times my buy-in. And once you realize that, you're like, wow, okay, so there's really not a huge incentive to just cash a lot if you're always going to min cash. And so then I know for me, radically changed. I started cashing, like 15% of the time, but I'd moved to like 9x as sort of my average cashing factor, because now, you're cashing far less often, but you're in that top 3 way more often. And you're right. It's the payout structure. And I think it's so critical to understand what sort of payout structure there is. And I think it does incent taking on variance at some of those spots like John's talking about, 11-handed. I think, especially if it's not life-changing money to ladder up a position or two. This isn't the main event final table where it's $1 million to ladder up one position. I think accepting what you think is a flip is probably the right play in a lot of cases.
Yeah, the only thing I thought about afterwards was last year at the Fall Poker Classic, I played 3 tournaments and final tabled 2 of them. So, and the other one I busted like way, way early.
So you kind of wanted the final table?
Well, yeah. So a final table would have been, and this year I'm only going to play 2 tournaments. So it would have been nice to get 2 final tables, but I can't do that now.
And that is, you talk about that, and I think, some people might say, well, what's the difference or whatever. And there is a glory piece. And I think a lot of us, I'm there. I want the recognition. I just played a tournament, luckily I got second place, but I didn't get the picture. Like, it was very frustrating, and I try to consider myself a humble person, but I like being recognized. And I think it'd be awesome to be at the Fall Poker Classic and get pictured at the final table. I mean, Chris, you just had it, being in the final table photo, I think is a pretty cool thing. And so I totally get that, John. Unless I didn't understand you.
Nope, it's all good. I just didn't have anything more to add.
No, you're right.
You summed it up perfectly.
I'm like, oh no, awkward silence. What did I say? I just offended John somehow, and I don't even know how.
You just said it so eloquently. There was nothing more I could add.
Right. I basically just said the exact same thing you said, only in words that I could understand.
We were all speechless.
Oh, I get ready to, that happens to me a lot. Just ask my wife and kids. Well, good. I mean, this is good stuff. I mean, Chris and John, thanks for bringing this up. Any other, questions or thoughts from you guys? Rob?
No. My only thing is poker's just a great game. It really is a lot of fun. And, when you're sitting there, particularly once the money bubble broke, everyone kind of lightens up a little bit, and people are just having fun at the table. And it's just a good time.
I love it too. And we come back to what Negreanu said last week too, just, doing it in community. For me, that's the life-giving part. Like this stuff, this wrestling. And, my wife was like, how can you be talking about poker again? Like, I don't know, but I love it. But I think, the idea of, like you said, John, it's so much fun, especially as you get to know more players at the table, wrestling with it, talking to other people about it. man, to me, that's what the real rich part of this game is, not just the actual dealing of the cards and putting in the chips.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well said.
All right, guys. Well, thank you. Thanks again. I'm going to go ahead and do our little outro stuff here. You're welcome to stick around. Otherwise, you can log off. But, man, thanks for bringing those hands. And as I mentioned before, Ryan LaPlante, too bad he was running deep in a tournament. So he thought it would just be better, more safe to just reschedule. So we'll get him on sometime in November. But this was fun while it was fresh to kind of rehash the FPC stuff.
Yeah, it's good to talk about.
All right.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thanks a
Have
lot.
a good night. Yeah.
Yep. Good night. All right, everybody. Well, thanks to the panelists. That was super fun. I just love those discussions. As I mentioned in the beginning, a few things coming up. This Wednesday, October 9th, we have a couple of opportunities for those who are members of the Rec Poker community from 4 to 5:30. We're just going to have some open hours. I'm just going to be available through Zoom, or you can just telephone in. If you're more of a beginning player, if you just want to talk about some of the basics, maybe even kind of rehash what we talked about in this episode. If you're like, some of it didn't really make sense, let's take it down a notch. Happy to talk about that, but it's just open hours to talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about from 4 until 5:30 p.m. Central. And then later that evening, again, Wednesday night, October 9th, we're doing Chapter 3 of the Andrew Brokus book, Playing Optimal Poker. That's at 6:30 to 7:45 p.m. Central Time. And then on Thursday, we're going to try this. We'll see if it works. We're just going to have a community kickoff. We're calling it. Just anybody who's part of the Rec Poker community. If you're a member, the event link is in the site there. From 8:30 to 10, just jump on if you want and just kind of meet the folks that are part of the panel on a regular basis, meet each other, and we'll just kind of hang out without an agenda and just kind of meet each other and see what's going on. Hopefully we'll get some folks from around the world that I know are part of the members. That'd be fun if that worked out for them. October 12th is a Saturday, and we're doing a podcast interview on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Central Time, and that is with Alec Torelli. And the reason we're doing it then is because I believe he's in Italy, and this is what worked for his schedule. And then jumping ahead a little bit further, October 16th, a week from Wednesday, we're going to do our second breakdown of an MSPT final table. That'll be starting about 6:45 p.m. that night on the 16th. And so all of this stuff is available in the events section of the members area. If you're not a member and you want to check it out, you can get a 1-month free trial. Just go to rec.poker, look for member access, and you can get into it there. Otherwise, just get in on our email newsletter every week now. I've been sending out a schedule of what's coming up, and so you can stay in tune that way. Otherwise, follow us on Twitter, Facebook. We try to keep stuff updated on there as well. So again, thanks to everybody for jumping on here. Thanks to Running Aces, who is our official sponsor. Been with us from the beginning and all 150 episodes now that they've been supporting us. So with that, signing off on behalf of Chris Jones, John Somsky, Rob Washam, and myself, Steve Fredlund. Have a good night. Good luck on and off the film. Take care.